So yesterday I posted a video critiquing Frank Turek's treatment of Deuteronomy 22 and the issues of rape that are being addressed within that passage. One of the comments I received was from a fellow who said in his part of the world where he was raised, would not be an issue or a consideration. And so he was critical of me and also claimed that there was this consensus throughout history of how to read Deuteronomy 22, which I was rejecting. Well, in terms of if you want to make a claim about there being a consensus historical position on how to interpret a passage, show your work, show your evidence to undergird that claim. Time and again, I find that people make sweeping claims about the consensus history of all Christian thought, and yet they don't have the slightest evidence to support these kinds of sweeping claims about what Christians throughout history have believed. But the other thing I want to point out here is that just because you come from a part of the world in which things like women who have been sexually assaulted, marrying the person who sexually assaulted them is not a significant moral issue, doesn't mean that people who think it is a significant moral issue are thereby wrong. The nature of moral knowledge is such that we can stand on moral principles alone and reject what are at various points in history consensus opinions. Just look at the history of Christian thought, and you can find that at various points in Christian history, in various regions of the church throughout history, there were positions that were at that time and in that place consensus opinions, which I think we should nonetheless reject. For example, it was a consensus opinion throughout much of church history that it is appropriate to target civilians in warfare. It was a consensus opinion at various points and times and places that human infants are sinful and morally culpable for the sin of Adam, that some racial groups are inferior to others and should be subjugated from the others or separated from the others in some sort of civil arrangement of segregation, that the Jewish people have a special curse on them, that women are intellectual inferiors to men, that animal suffering is not a significant moral criterion which we should consider when we are considering how to treat animals, that it is impossible for a husband to rape his wife, that a woman who does not scream for help during sexual intercourse is thereby a tacit, willing partner to that sexual intercourse and thus is morally culpable for it if it is outside of marriage. These are just some of the things under which many Christians have held consensus opinions at points in history. And nonetheless, I believe on all of these counts, these people were wrong. They had held false views. So just because people appeal to a historical consensus at one or another time is not a force majeure that forces you to accept them as in fact being right. Now, when you do reject a historical consensus opinion at one or another time, you should do so with some degree of moral sobriety, a recognition of the significance of rejecting that opinion. But it doesn't mean that you can't have excellent grounds to reject that opinion, because time and again we see through the history of human moral fallibility that consensus opinions have indeed reigned supreme time and again for what were in fact morally aberrant and indeed abhorrent positions.